13 minutes past 7 on your breakfast rush this Wednesday morning. And for years, the issue of pit toilets in South African schools has been a painful reminder of the inequalities that still exist in our education system. We've seen heartbreaking tragedies where children have lost their lives after falling into unsafe pit toilets, prompting widespread call for urgent action. Now, the Minister of Basic Education has come forward and announced that the backlog of pit toilets identified under the 2018 Act or SAFE initiative has officially been eradicated. While this marks a significant milestone, Amnesty International South Africa says the work is far from over. And to tell us more about this, we're joined by spokesperson for Amnesty International South Africa, Jenevieve Quintal. Thank you for your time and welcome to the Breakfast Rush on Radio Al-Ansar.
Good morning, Nazmira. Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely to have you this morning. What was your immediate reaction when the minister announced that the SAFE initiative backlog has been cleared?
Well, firstly, look, we acknowledge and we think that they've managed to clear the backlog. It's an important step towards, fulfilling what the Constitution says, that, providing protection to learners, safety and upholding their rights. But while we welcome this long overdue development, there are still many schools in this country which are using pit toilets that are unaccounted for. Because remember, the SAFE initiative was only made up of schools that were audited in 2018. And if you look at figures that have come out since then, it's in the Basic Education's infrastructure report that comes out once a year, the South African Human Rights Commission, and figures coming out from the provinces, there are still schools that weren't accounted for in the SAFE initiative who are using pit toilets. And for us as well, here is that
please go ahead.
ECD centres, early childhood development centres, fall under basic education.
Correct, yes.
And those have not been dealt with yet either.
Sure. So for those that may not be aware, Jenevieve, or are not familiar with it, what exactly was the SAFE initiative and what schools did it cover?
So in 2016, pit toilets were banned in South African schools as part of the minimum uniform norms and standards for public school infrastructure. That's a very long title. And it actually went to court and said that pit toilets needed to be removed from all schools. By 2016, this hadn't happened. And the Department of Basic Education nationally took an audit of schools that had pit toilets. And this had formed part of this SAFE initiative that we're talking about. And this was supposed to put us in line with the minimum norms and standards. But since that 2018 audit, the Department of Basic Education has actually failed to eradicate those pit toilets, and that was only in 3,000 and something schools. And an audit hadn't been done since then. So that's how we had the SAFE initiative. And obviously, we know that infrastructure is a problem in this country. I heard the minister talking yesterday about, provinces that are not using their infrastructure budget. That's also part of the problem to upgrade infrastructure, and that means upgrading schools, which means that some schools that didn't fall part of that 2018 audit and did not fall part of the SAFE initiative sort of fell at the waistline.
Does the completion of the SAFE program mean that there are no more pit toilets in South African schools, or is the picture a little bit more complex than we think?
No, it doesn't mean there are no pit toilets. And it isn't complicated, Nazmira. What happens now is, what the minister was saying is that it's now up to each province to look at their schools and to ensure that they use the infrastructure budget to replace pit toilets, etc. And we're saying that that's not enough. We can't just leave it to the provinces. There actually needs to be a larger national audit, again, check how many schools are still using pit toilets, and then put a proper plan and deadline for when those pit toilets should be removed. And then the provinces know what they're working to, and the national department can then hold those departments accountable if they don't eradicate the pit toilets. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is there are still schools using pit toilets. And again, as I said, a big concern for us is early childhood development centers, which now fall under the DBE. We've been, as Amnesty International, been working on a case of a little 3-year-old boy, Unotebo Mboteni, who fell into a pit toilet in 2023 at his preschool in the Eastern Cape and died. And we cannot have more children, more little toddlers dying in pit toilets.
Agreed. Jenevieve, Amnesty has said that pit toilets violate children's rights to dignity, to health, to education, and like you've mentioned, even life. Can you explain why this issue is fundamentally a human right issue at the moment?
Absolutely. As you know, in our constitution, it provides that for everyone who lives in this country should have access to education. And part of access to that education is having education in a safe environment, being educated with dignity. Our constitution is very clear about dignity for all. And all of these rights fall within what we are talking about. Unfortunately, we did a report in 2019 that the type of education you get still depends on where you were born, where you live, whether you live in a township or whether you live in a suburb. And unfortunately, this is still the legacy of apartheid. And it shouldn't be that way. Every child in this country should be getting the same type of education, should have the safe environment to learn in. That needs proper toilets, desks, classrooms, all those infrastructure issues. And unfortunately, we are not seeing that. Mm-hmm. There's still a big discrepancy. And so we will carry on advocating and campaigning to ensure that children in this country are able to learn in a safe environment and that no child dies in a pit toilet again.
In closing this morning, Jenevieve, Amnesty is calling for a new national audit. Please, can you expand on that for us briefly?
As I said, so while we know that the 2018 audit is now done, they've cleared that backlog, there are still schools in this country that are using pit toilets. It's in the DBE's own reports. If you go look at the South African Human Rights Commission, and even some of the provinces are reporting that they've still got pit toilets. So we are saying there needs to be another national audit. And with that national audit, we then need to set clear timelines of when those pit toilets be eradicated, and they need to be eradicated as soon as possible. And there needs to be accountability if those toilets are not eradicated.
Spokesperson for Amnesty International South Africa, Jenevieve Quintal, talking to us about the total eradication of pit toilets that's needed within the province and in the country at large. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Nazira.